Namaste everyone. Thank you
Namaskar.
for watching. Welcome to another series of my conversations with Indian scholars to help us understand, the various aspect of our knowledge traditions. Today, my guest is Professor Kapil Kapoor. He's a scholar of linguistics and literature and an authority on Indian intellectual and knowledge traditions. He was professor of English, Center for Linguistics and English from 1996 onwards, and was designated as a concurrent professor, the only professor to get that recognition at the Special Center for Sanskrit Studies at JNU. And of course, being in that position, he's guided tens of PhDs and MPhils. What a privilege I feel it must have been to study under him at JNU. I personally today feel totally privileged to have these one-on-one conversations and bring his endless wisdom and insights, bring out his endless wisdom and insights, of course, for myself, but as well as for all the listeners of these videos for many, many years and maybe decades ahead. Thank you, Professor Kapoor, for joining me today. I will start today's conversation with a very interesting screenshot that sometime back, it is on your screen, sir, that Dr. Raj Vedam in one of his Sangam talks with us had shown as part of his slide. And this, he said, is the means of knowledge, and the Shada Darshanas, as you mentioned yesterday over our call. And he mentioned that all Indian religions have derived from these 6 sources of knowledge. I've been very intrigued about this and had been coaxing him to speak about this further. And then he told me there is no better speaker than you in the country who could speak about these. And so here I am at your feet, learning with you.
I think this Professor Saab, the gentleman who made this, he should have been asked to speak on these also, because he has made it so beautifully, so visual, to make the non-corporeal idea visible. It's not an easy job. So he has done that. So it's very nice.
Yeah, whether it is the right direction or no, and he mentioned multiple times, right, that this is as far as he has learned. So I mean, he wasn't confident. That's why he said the best source of truth of all of this is you. And so we've been trying to get you but to speak on this, but now here I am in this dialogue. ये उन्होंने लिखा है जैसे प्रमाण, उसमें लिखा प्रत्यक्ष, अनुमान, उपमान, अर्थापत्ति, अनुपलब्धि और शब्द. And this, he says, leads to Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaishishka, Mimamsa, Advaita, from which Charvak Buddhism.
You see, first of all, let us begin by making a small distinction between darshan and philosophy. And it's a very well-known distinction. And even before that, let me mention two books. A very wise, most of my teachers were very, very wise. One of them in the school, when I asked a question which appeared difficult, he told me, there is no question, no intelligent question that anybody asks. There is no intelligent question that the questioner himself cannot answer. That the questioner himself cannot answer. If it is an intelligently asked question, that person is capable of finding the answer also. Also, provided there is sufficient application and there is right application. That is, he applies right application very grossly will mean that you will know from which book or which shastra you will get the answer. And sufficient application then you read it, study it, think about it in a sustained manner. And there is no question that anybody can ask that that person cannot answer himself. Now, to answer most of the questions about Indian philosophical systems, there are two books that I have found all my answers in. In fact, I do not claim at all, I cannot, that I have even understood these books completely. I'm reminded of my postgraduate teacher, a teacher in MA English, Delhi University, Professor V.V. John. Professor V.V. John was staying, his family was in Jodhpur. He was staying in the hostel, same hostel in which we students were staying. And we would often meet him. He was a rather severe looking person, but he had a great sense of humor. And with the trepidation, one day, he was teaching us history of English language. And he had referred to many books. One of the books he said, you must read, was a book by A.C. I pronounce it as Baugh, B-A-U-G-H, but maybe it is Buff. English is very notorious, about its spellings and pronunciation. So A.C. Baugh. And one day I was carrying that book and I ran into him and I said, "Sir, this book you have mentioned, is this book sufficient for the course?" He said, "Yes, if you understand it." This one book is sufficient if you understand it. So the two books that I am going to mention are sufficient. I mean, they are secondary reading. So I don't mean that the primary reading doesn't need to be done. I mean, one has to read, here mentioned Buddhism, then one has to read the Buddhist text, the Buddhist Magme is very vast. Tripitaka, teen petiyan, उनके ज्ञान की तीन पेटियां हैं, three boxes full of knowledge. So you know Tripitaka. So if primary text one has to read, but primary texts in India, they are composed in a very abbreviated style, sutras. And because they are composed in sutras, because they were to be stored in the mind. This was not a reading culture. It was a remembering culture. It is a culture that stores knowledge in the mind, not outside the mind, not on paper or CDs or other objects, laptops and other, but the knowledge was stored in the mind. And very late, when I was doing my undergraduate in a nice college, nice because it was a co-education college, and for me it was a new experience. So in that college, there was a Sardarji student who looked very, lost all the time. But in the class, he rarely spoke. But when the teacher asked him to speak, he used to speak so well and use so many words whose meanings we did not know. So one day I asked him, "Where have you picked up your vocabulary?" He says, I simply put into memory Collins' Dictionary of English. He simply remembered Collins' dictionary. He memorized Collins' dictionary. You see, dictionary, words with meaning. Collins' Gem Dictionary. Itni si hoti thi. But imagine, after all, Shakespeare had only 8,000 words in his vocabulary. And Lord Alfred Tennyson, 19th century, he said, Shakespeare had only 8,000 words as vocabulary. I have 22,000. But damn it, I have nothing to say. I have the words, but I have nothing to say. And Shakespeare said so much. So he had remembered Collins Gem. So memory is a very important. So it was stored. So the texts were written in sutra. Sutra means a thread. हमारे यहाँ सूत्र, सूत पंजाबी में कहते हैं सूत, सूत कत्या मतलब के वीविंग उसको पूनी पूनी लगा के चरखे पे जो करते हैं सूत सूत्र और थ्रेड एंड जब हम when we use a needle and thread and we let us say thread two things together, you know, then sutra means a thread that threads different objects, a thread which threads knowledge. So sutra was also used for the text which was written in sutras, and the texts were all texts of knowledge, texts of knowledge. They have to be read. So in you mentioned the six Shad Darshan, although I find that Professor Saab has Buddhism also there and maybe some other system also. Because, you know, India has three sampradaya, three schools. India always had three schools of thought. Three, they were always in dialogue with each other. Three schools of thought. Their relationship was collaborative confrontational. Collaboratively confrontational. You see, they were not opposed to each other simply because you have to oppose, but they were genuinely different systems in ontology, that is, objects which exist, and epistemology, and the means by which we can know the objects. So they differed. Their understanding of this universe and this life, living beings, and the goal, purpose, or quality of human life. So these three systems they differ. These three systems are Brahman Sampradaya, Brahman, not Brahman, not caste, Brahman, Vedanta. Brahman called Vedanta. They were also called Vaiyakarnas, the grammarians, because the grammarians were all Vedantins and they belonged to that school. So one school is Sanatan Dharma ka school, Sanatan Dharma ka, which is you call it Vedanta, you call it Brahman Sampradaya. Brahman, because Brahman is the core concept of Sanatan, the Sanatan knowledge or Sanatan Dharma, the Vedic, the entire Vedic knowledge system, which is called Shrauta, Shrauta, from Shravana, because Vedas are not meant to be read, they are meant to be heard. And heard, received from the ear, with the ear, and then meditated upon. Meditated. Shravan and Manana. Shravan and Manana go together. So, this Sanatan is one school. The second school is Jaina, and third is Buddhist, or second is Buddhist, and third is Jaina. We are not mentioning them chronologically, it is a horizontal statement. They are all at the same level. काल क्रम जो है, the sequence of time, well, there are theories, but some people say that perhaps the Jain system was the most ancient, and then you can say the Sanatan and then Bodh.
Ji, in any case, you've mentioned multiple times that you're not too fond of chronology of India.
Yes, I mean, काल क्रम हमारे यहाँ ज्यादा इम्पोर्टेंट नहीं होता, विचारों का क्रम इम्पोर्टेंट है. The sequence of ideas, chronology of ideas is important. So there were three sampradaya: Sanatan, Bauddha, or Jaina. These are the three sampradaya. And when I say that no question you can ask that you cannot answer yourself, find an answer, then I was going to mention two books which are secondary books, and then I said that it doesn't mean that one doesn't read primary books. And in primary, I mentioned three Pitaka of Bodhas, very large body of literature. Jain also Jain canon is very rich canon, very rich canon, and of course Vedic canon. Vedic canon is also extremely rich canon. So one lifetime is not enough for just one of these three systems. So you have to become a wine taster or a tea taster. So for ideas also, you just rapidly touch upon them. जैसे खो खो खेलते थे ना बचपन में खो खो
जी
भाग के हाथ लगा के
Touch,
हाथ
yeah.
लगा के हाथ लगा के निकल जाना. So that way perhaps one can go through these, and that exercise itself is quite a reflective exercise. It is not to be dismissed, because they say that depending on your shraddha and uh, your intellect, intellect, and there is shraddha and your intellect and your application, your reverence, your intellect and your application. Depending on that, you can learn Sanskrit language in 10 years, 10 months, 10 days, 10 minutes, or 10 seconds. It is said, depending on your intellect, your shraddha, and your application. Abhyasa. Kitna karenge. The two books, one, Acharya Baldev Upadhyay of Varanasi. Acharya Baldev Upadhyay, he wrote a book, Bhartiya Darshan. Bhartiya Darshan. I can show you this book. This book I can show you.
Wonderful.
And,
published hai?
This is published by Chaukhamba Orientalia, Varanasi and Delhi. Chaukhamba. Chaukhamba were famous publishers for century, publishing Indian texts, intellectual texts. And now they have broken into Chaukhamba Orientalia and Chaukhamba. There is one other Chaukhamba. I mean, they, as it happens. So this one book, the other book I am going to mention, I can't show you because it is in Delhi in my flat. But this is one book, Bhartiya Darshan by Acharya Baldev Upadhyay. तो आपको तो कुछ नहीं करना है, इसको पढ़ लीजिए बस. उसके बाद we will switch places. I will ask you the question and you will give me the answer. It requires greater intelligence to ask an intelligent question than the intelligence you need to answer the question. Greater intelligence is needed to ask an intelligent question. That's why
I'm only a beginner, so all you and the guests listening this must excuse me if I ask naive questions and very basic
questions. The basic questions have to be asked. So this second book is Madhvacharya. Now this Bharti Darshan, it was, I think, first published. I will just check again. It was the third edition is mentioned. Third edition is 1984, but it must have been, written far back. 1979, first edition, 1979. And Acharya Baldev Upadhyay ji, teacher, he dedicates it to his teacher. No, not teacher. Generally, people dedicate the book to sometimes the teacher, sometimes the father, their father. So this is Prakathan. It is by Baldev Upadhyay ji. He has not written anything, but he has given the photograph of his father. This is
जी
his father.
जी डेडिकेशन एक तरह से
This is the dedication
जी
to his father. And it has a symbolism, you know. Look at the dress.
हाँ जी
And in his hand, माला जप रहे हैं.
अच्छा जी
माला है ना?
जी जी जी
माला में 108 beads होते हैं. और उसके बीच में जो होता है 108, वो उसको भी कभी क्रॉस नहीं करते. You start come reach here, then you go back. Then you go back. जाप यज्ञ का ये नियम है.
जी
जपने का नियम है. So 1979. The second book, Madhvacharya, this was composed in the 13th century. 13th century. We don't know when, but in 13th century. Because Madhvacharya was born in 1199 and he lived for 104 years. And he died in 1303 AD. So he must have composed that book. Composed. Written is a wrong word. This Bharati Darshan has been written. But Madhvacharya's book title is Sarva Darshan Sangrah. Sarva Darshan Sangrah. It literally means the collection of all philosophies, all philosophical systems, right?
जी
And he composed that book in the 13th century. What is...
आपने एक बार बात शुरू करने से पहले कहा था कि दर्शन और फिलॉसफी
हाँ.
are not the same.
No, we must appreciate the two terms. So I was saying Madhvacharya, we must know who was Madhvacharya. Madhvacharya was the guru of Harihar Bukka. Harihar Bukka were the two generals of Kakatiya's dynasty in Warangal. When that kingdom collapsed in the onslaught of the Tughlaqs, after fighting for almost 100 years, that dynasty collapsed. Then Harihar Bukka went away from that place, and Madhvacharya was the guru of Kakatiya also. So Madhvacharya took them under his charge, and he helped them establish the Vijayanagar Empire. Madhvacharya ji helped them establish the Vijayanagar Empire.
Isn't that Vidyaranya Swami who actually converted Harihar Bukka from Islam to Hinduism, something like that?
So, मेरे ख्याल में that is a name given to the same person.
अच्छा
ये जंगल में रहने वाले,
जी
जंगल में रहने वाले.
जी
So this Madhvacharya Sarvdarshan Sangrah has 16 chapters. That means 16 philosophies. And there is a chronology of ideas in that. If I had the book here, I will take out the table of contents and show you how he begins with the Charvakas. The Charvakar are the Indian materialists, the most materialistic system of thought, Charvak. But Indian materialists are not scotch drinking materialists. They are ethical materialists. You see, ethical materialists. Like Kannada, who composed Vaisheshika Sutra, Vaisheshik Darshan, which is a materialistic darshan. There is no God in that darshan. He was he lived on the grains, the units of grain which were left in the field after the crop had been cut and the grain had been taken away by the farmer, then whatever grains were left in the field, he would collect them and he used to survive on them. And he was a materialist. You see, he was a materialist. So Kannad, his name is Kana Bhokta. Kana, अनाज के कन भोगने वाला, अनाज के कन भोगता. So he was a materialist. So चारवाकों से शुरू होती है and it ends with the the totally subjective idealist system. I don't have the book here. I cannot recount all the 16 chapters right here. But 16 systems in that are chronologically arranged. But the chronology is the evolution of ideas. Evolution of ideas. For example, now before he starts his composition, his book, his text, before he starts, like most Indian thinkers and most Indian texts, he starts with a Mangala Charana. We believe in doing something auspicious when we are going to do something important. So when we used to go for exam, our mothers will give us a spoon of curd. दही खा के जाओ.
जी, पंजाब में स्पेशली तो
पंजाब
बहुत ही
हाँ दही खा के जाओ और भगवान का नाम लेके. You see, so auspiciousness is a very important thinking category for us. So Mangala Charan is Mangala Acharan. Or Mangala Charan mein he remembers the Lord Shiva and it gives a stuti, he makes a stuti offers a stuti to Mahadeva. And then the first chapter is Charvak. And he starts the chapter in a very interesting way. He says, what a contradiction. I have just given my oblation to God Shiva, to Mahadev. And here are thinkers who say no God exists.
Beautiful.
So he starts with that.
Beautiful.
And then expounds the Charavaka system. Charavaka literally means चारू वाक, जिनके शब्द सुनने में अच्छे लगते हैं लोगों को. इससे अच्छा और क्या लगेगा कि भैया कोई ज्यादा सोचने की जरूरत नहीं है, भगवान नहीं होता, आत्मा नहीं होती, कोई पुनर्जन्म नहीं होता, यही शरीर है, यही एक सत्य है. जब ये खत्म हो जाएगा तो कुछ नहीं बचेगा. इसलिए जब तक जिंदा हो अपना घी पियो, घी खाओ और आनंद से रहो. कोई आफ्टर वर्ल्ड नहीं है, कोई गॉड्स नहीं है, कोई गॉड नहीं है, कोई आत्मा या सेल्फ नहीं है, nothing. You see, so it's a pleasant because materialism or non-belief comes naturally to man. It is part of his equipment. God sends him with this equipment. Because
would that be true? Because, sorry to interrupt your thought, but if you look around, Professor Saab, all around the world, सारे जो shamanic traditions हैं, for example, चाहे Native Americans के हों या Australian Aborigines, सबके सब में Polynesians, सब में एक nature worship, for example, एक innate natural worship, isn't that central to all human beings, at least native populations, instead of
the question is, when the child is born, is he born with an admiration for nature? You see, for example, telling lies. You don't have to teach anybody how to tell lies. But you have to teach people to tell the truth. Telling lies comes naturally. You know, so we have to teach people. I remember Mark Twain. You know, Mark Twain, he has an essay. my second lie. My second lie. He says, my first lie is far back. I don't remember what it was and when I uttered it. But my second lie I uttered when I was 9 days old. 9 days old. I uttered my second lie. I had discovered that when the nappy pin hurt me and I cried, somebody came and, showered affection on me, huh? Patted me and all that. So one day I cried even when the pin had not hurt me. So that was my second lie. So lying comes natural. So in that sense, you see, there is no doubt from your question that some people are born with a tendency which is adhyatmic, spiritual, from the beginning. ये जैसे गुरु नानक थे या आदि शंकराचार्य थे, ये शुरू से ही बचपन से ही इनकी जो वृत्ति inclination, it was towards the non-material, otherworldly, not in this world. And there are others who are not only born with the material vritti, but in spite of all listening, all the upadeshas, reading all the sacred books, they die also with the same vritti. And so this is I think these are specific to human beings. It is good not to generalize. So Sarvdarshan Sangraha is a second book. The difference is that Bharatiya Darshan by Baldev Upadhyay ji, it explains to you under separate chapters, separate heads, the different philosophical systems, their categories, their books, tells you what are the books, it's a very, very descriptive book. It describes in detail. And even its content, it describes in detail. So it's a wonderful book. There is no doubt about it. And in a parishisht, in an appendix, he gives you subtle issues that are involved in a particular system of thought also. So there is one. But Sarvdarshan Sangraha is composed by Madhvacharya to show the different approaches. His is a more analytical work. Different approaches to what? Approaches to realizing in life the four purusharthas, dharma, artha, kama, moksha. The different approaches to realizing these, because only when you realize these, you reach at the end moksha, freedom from all this. So this people often say that these four dharma, artha, kama, moksha, they are the objects, goals of life. No, they are not. They are not goals of life. They are means. They are means to achieving the ultimate goal of life, which is liberation of the self. Liberation of the self. आत्मा का विवेक, आत्मा का प्रत्यक्ष और आत्मा का शरीर से फ्री हो जाना. You don't have to die to do that. You see, yourself becoming free. That's why the great sannyasis, those who become sannyasis, you see, when they take sannyas, fire is burned around them, and they are made to sit in the middle, which is symbolic of the fact that their body has gone, their body has been burnt. Now they have no body. So Yogi Adityanath ji, when his father died and he was cremated, very near his place. He didn't go because his human world, human body is not there. It's not there. He's a sannyasi. So human connections are not there. Their connections are with the body and the mind. And the mind rests in the body. Mind is one of the senses. It's a superior sense, but it is a sense which is behind all senses. Only then the senses work, right? So he did it. So sannyasi is like this. So Madhvacharya. So here, these two books, I want to say that anybody who is interested in philosophy, Indian philosophy, should read them with great care, should read them, as I said, sufficient application and right application. Right application. Coming to the question, first question. Darshan is from Drish Dhatu, which means to see, to see. And as you know, Sanskrit language has a very, very powerful system of forming words by derivation. All the words of Sanskrit language, they are derived from 1957 verb roots, dhatus. And if you say, anybody, people sometimes feel, only 1957 dhatus, but what a rich repository it is, you realize, when we know that Hindi today, for example, maybe has only about 1100 roots, 1100 dhatus. So 1957, and there is a Paninian dhatu patha. There is a dhatu patha. Panini has classified those dhatus into 10 groups. 10 groups. And they are called varga, vargas. 10 varga, 10 classes. So the first one is, of course, famous Bhu Sattayama. Bhu root से बनता है Bhavati, and Bhu means this dhatu part. The difference between a dhatu and a dhatu part is that dhatus are collected and they are ordered and classified into groups, and against each dhatu the core meaning is given. Meaning Bhu Sattayama. So Bhu, the root Bhu means existence. Satta, existence. So Asti and Bhavati, there are two verbs in Sanskrit. One means to exist, that is Asti. This chair is Asti. And when I use a word like horned tiger, Bertrand Russell says they gave that sentence to Wittgenstein, says that Wittgenstein was given that sentence by his teacher when he came for joining the Cambridge University. And the sentence was, horned tiger does not exist. Now, if it does not exist, then why do you have to say it does not exist? Huh? So, horned tiger does not exist. It's one of those conundrums, like the barber shaves everyone in the village. Does he shave himself? You know, that is the logical conundrum. So, if I say in the Indian tradition, it is horned rabbit, not tiger. Shasha Shringa, the horns of a rabbit. Rabbit horns. Now, when I say rabbit horns, you know that a rabbit with horns does not exist. No asti. Shasha Shringa nasti. Right? But Shasha Shringa bhavati. आपके दिमाग में बन जाता है. You are able to see. जी. तो वो बन जाता है. So asti और bhavati का भेद हो जाता है. Now coming back to darshan, drish dhatu se we went to dhatu part hai. Panini's grammatical system has 5 books, different books. We will talk about them some other day. One of them is Dhatu Patha, and there are others. Anyways, don't. I am telling myself, don't get tempted to enter into Panini now.
जी.
So one should not be tempted into Panini. So there, drish to see, darshan, dekhna, seeing, or it can also mean what is seen, or it can mean how to see. The philosophical system can teach you how to see. Philosophical system is a statement of what has been seen. What has been seen.
Got it.
And it is also a system which tells us what to see. क्या देखना है, क्या समझना है, क्या समझना है, क्या देखना है. So Indian thought, contrary to the opinion that are expressed in English by Anglo-Indians. I'm not talking of the Anglo-Indian race. I'm talking of those Indians who are more royal than the Angles
And
or the Saxons.
जी.
Eh?
जी.
If or their writing or some, in fact, the Western scholars have written much better on Indian thought than many of the Indian scholars. Of course, some of the Indian scholars, they cannot be matched. I mean, Baldev Upadhyay cannot be matched by a Western writer. See, because it is, if it is your language, that inwardness with the language, inwardness with words, it comes only with your language. So in the same way, we cannot match Shakespeare.
जी.
We cannot match because he is inward with the language. And so we have to depend on so many annotations and all that. So darshan, Indian philosophical systems are very empirical. Empirical. क्या देखा, क्या देखना है, ये क्या संसार, ये क्या है, ये है क्या? What is this world? What I see? Do you also see what I see? Does everybody see what I see? And what I see, is it the reality? Is it real? If so, is it the complete reality? Is that all? There is nothing beyond this. All this. So these are very empirical questions. And Indian philosophy is not meant for as a game of logic. Many times Western philosophy, when the Western philosophers philosophize, it looks like a game. Our great Plato, because Plato is hardly a Western philosopher, he is an Indian philosopher. He is Aristotle perhaps moves a little away from the Indian, but even Aristotle is Indian. The Greeks are our siblings in their thought and everything. And they have been appropriated by the West. In any case, they were in the Middle East. And they were Middle East, they were cheek by jowl with the Semitic Arabs, with the Semitic race. So Greeks were Aryans, and there were these Arabs and the Jews. The Jews and the Arabs, two Semitic races, close together, living together, all the time hating each other and fighting each other till today. They are their Mahabharat is a long continuation. The Mahabharata of two brothers, two siblings, the Jews and the Arabs. So they were there. So they are like us. They think like us. Plato, but Plato, when you read his dialogues, his analysis analysis proceeds through questions and answers. Sometimes the questions are raised by his friends. You know the setting of his dialogues. You
जी
don't know the setting of Plato's dialogues.
नहीं, बस कुछ anecdotally बचपन में मेरे दादाजी बताते थे. I think it was for Plato only, or was it for Aristotle? Just a very beautiful anecdote. He was sitting with some 16 students under a tree, if I recall correctly. And here comes this. There was a big group of men with a beautiful dancer woman in them, who was, all of these men were watching the dance. And she comes to Plato and says, "Oh, you're wasting your time trying to teach these your students. I can take them away in a whiff." And he says, "Yes, you can. I'm trying to pull them up. You're trying to pull them down." Some anecdote.
Yes, I hadn't heard
I
this.
remember.
It's a very good one. The setting is, in fact, Plato's dialogues, Plato and his friends,
Ji.
there are a number of them, Cratylus and Alcibiades, and there are so many. At any given time in the dialogue, there are at least 5, 6, 7 people present. You see? Now, they used to get together, these friends, take a big jar of wine and go to Agra. Agra is a garden outside the city. So now you will wonder, what is this Agra?
Agra, ji.
It is Agra. The Proto-Indo-European is Agra, the first one. So this Agra is also Agra. It was established earlier than the city of Delhi or anything else. You see, and they go outside to that garden, and they sit down. And they sit down in a circle. And when somebody starts talking seriously, Socrates says, wait, let's first have a drink. Let's first have a drink. And then we will talk. And then the wine is distributed, and then they start talking. You see?
Wow.
And this is the setting. This is the setting. I remember another beautiful setting from the Western tradition. Horace. Horace was a Roman. And this is the time of early Roman Empire, when they were fighting the Greeks. And they were defeating them and all that. Now this Horace was physically a weakling, but he was a poet. I mean, he had the poetic sensibility. So when the armies were raised and every young man had to go, he was also forced to go. But he ran away from battle. He was scared. He ran away and he was caught, and he was about to be tried when a relation of his, or a friend of his relation, who was a senator, Roman senator, he got him released. Otherwise he would have been either sentenced to death or something, and life imprisonment. And that man, who was fond of his poetry, he gave him a small piece of land in the Catalonian hills, which had a small land, about I am imagining about 1 acre or so.
Yeah.
And it had a small stream flowing in the middle of it, a small stream.
Yeah.
And Horace, in the introduction to his odes, Horace's odes and epodes, in that he says, I have a lovely time. I get up in a relaxed way. I get up around 10 or 11 in the morning. And then I just potter around. I have a little something to eat. And then I go to the stream and I have a bath. And then I come back and help myself to some food. And then I sleep in the afternoon. And I get up in the evening. And in the evening, my friends come. And we sit down. over cups of wine. Huh? And we sit down and talk. We don't talk about others. We don't talk ill of others or others. We don't talk about people.
We talk
We
about
talk
ideas.
about fundamental questions of life.
Wonderful.
What is the goal of life? What is life? And how to be lived and so on. So he remembers his father with great affection and dedication. He says, he put into me the habit of reading and writing and thinking, and he owed all this to his father. So cutting that out, coming back again, the darshan is a Indian philosophy is a statement of what wise people are able to see. See what? Jeev, Jagat, Jeev or Jagat. All life forms that you see. Plant है, जानवर है, हिरन है, शेर है, dog है, birds हैं, colorful birds हैं, not so colorful birds हैं, trees हैं, झाड़ियां हैं, और जगत, this whole spread, what we call the world, jagat, पहाड़ हैं, नदियां हैं, you see all this. And jagat may also be extended to once your mind evolves, then you look up into the sky and you have so many worlds there. And when you take in all that, it is a Brahmand, the whole cosmos. The whole cosmos, the niyama or the niyamaka, who is the organizer, who is the controlling force of this Brahmanda, this cosmos? It is Brahman. And compared to the cosmos, Brahmanda, this Kapil Kapoor's body, it is a pindand, one pind, one pind. And when people do that श्राद्ध, तो वो एक पिंड बनाते हैं, एक इतना सा कुछ अन्न का लेके आटे का लोई, एक पिंड बनाया जाता है, दैट रिप्रेजेंट्स जिसके लिए श्राद्ध किया जा रहा है. सो पिंड ऑल्सो मीन्स बॉडी. तो पिंडांड का नियामक, हु इज द नियामक ऑफ दिस पिंड? इसका नियामक है आत्मा. और हु इज द नियामक ऑफ ब्रह्मांड? इट इज परमात्मा. Brahman is the niyamak of the cosmos, and the two therefore are linked. The individual, the micro and the macro, they are the same. They are linked. They are connected. So I am not separate from you. I am not separate from this greenery that I am seeing. It is all life, and we are all part of the same life system. You see? तो ये दर्शन जो है, it depends on, darshan is on what you can see and observe. So it is not pure speculation. Of course, it doesn't mean that what you see, then you don't speculate, but you begin with what you see, and you come back to what you see. You come back to what you see with a greater understanding. So you mentioned yesterday Mimamsa, the Purva Mimamsa, the first is a Athato Dharma Jigyasa. I want to know what is Dharma. Huh? So that is my object of inquiry. And the last Uttar Mimamsa, Vedanta, Athato Brahma Jigyasa. जानना चाहता हूं ब्रह्म क्या है, ब्रह्मन क्या है. I want to know that. So between the two, between dharma and brahman, lies a whole range of thought. You see? So between the Purva Mimamsa and Uttar Mimamsa. So basically, Indian philosophy, let's use the word philosophy for darshan, Bharatiya darshan, is concerned with human life, is concerned with this jagat, this world, its nature, is concerned with life forms, all the living beings, jiva, jiska human being is one of the jiva. It is concerned with the relationship between jiva and jagat, jiva and jagat. And in pursuing that relationship, the Indian Bharatiya Darshan reaches the concept of Brahman. How its fundamental question, the fundamental question that the Bharatiya Darshan asks is Anekata me ekata. What is common? What is shared in all this multiplicity? In all this multiplicity, how does it hang together? And what is it? What is it that informs everything? Informs everything, all jiva or something. And that is where then they reach the concept of Brahman finally. Brahman. We will, when we come to that, maybe we will talk at length about that. So this is Bharatiya Darshan. What in the Western philosophy becomes an independent system of philosophy, a philosophical dimension, remains in Indian system only an instrument. For example, logic. Now, logic, if you look at Western philosophy, you have metaphysics. Metaphysics is about, the objects that exist, objects that you see, their nature, their spirit, their self, whatever about that. So it is metaphysics. Physics ke beyond meta, about physics, about the objects that you see, about everything. And therefore, the religious systems that they create are answers to their metaphysical speculation. Because this world must have been created. In metaphysics, when they pursue that, so they have a creator, karta. Brahman is not a karta. Is not a karta in the sense of this creator and this creation. So there's a fundamental difference. We'll come to that later. The question is, the metaphysics is the Western philosophy. First part of Western philosophy is metaphysics. Second part, epistemology. Epistemology, nature of knowledge. How knowledge is gained. How knowledge is gained. Limits to knowledge. Whether knowledge has to be knowledge. Is there any unknowability? Are there things that we cannot know? Isn't it? So epistemology generally means jnana. Jnana ka praman. How do we know that what we know is knowledge, is valid? How do we know? Do we actually know what we think we know? These are some of the things which epistemology will answer. They mean. Third is logic. Tark. Logic. Logic is a branch of Western philosophy. Epistemology is a branch of Western philosophy. Now you see, when I say that logic is an instrument in Bharatiya Darshan, it's not a branch of philosophy. It's not a philosophical system. It is an instrument of analysis. Instrument of analysis. You see? So we have the inductive logic and deductive logic, in a Western system. From general to particular and from particular to general, inductive. So we have the system. Francis Bacon, in his Novum Organum, he is the father of inductive philosophy. And Descartes, in his book on method, is the father of deductive logic, deductive philosophy. So inductive and deductive logic. So there are logic. Third, metaphysics, epistemology. Fourth, ethics. Ethics is a branch of philosophy. in the West. It is concerns itself with right and wrong. What is right and what is wrong. Kartavya, akartavya in our way mode, you see. क्या करना चाहिए क्या नहीं करना चाहिए क्या नहीं करना चाहिए. So this is the scope of ethics. And fifth is aesthetics, the science of beauty. It has again two parts. First, beauty in itself, the concept of beauty, which Plato examines in his symposium, in the dialogue symposium. You see? And second is Vyavharik Sundarta, Saundarya, Vyavharik, which is art, representation, creating representations which capture the beauty of something. So this is representation. So there, these branches, this is the aesthetics. And finally, sixth branch of philosophy in the West is psychology. Psychology, that is the mind, mind. So you have Freud, for example, who is in a way father of modern psychology, and Carl Jung, who followed him, who started with the Indian yoga philosophy, then abandoned it, having learnt everything from it and developed his own system. Then he abandoned it and talked against it later. A guru droh, Granth ka droh. Yeah, it's a kind of a guru. But then Carl Jung and Freud, jane jate hain. It is about the mind. It is about the mind. What is mind and how does mind function? And what are the kinds of things that the mind thinks about? So it's a science of thinking. It's a branch of how human mind thinks. So ये वेस्टर्न सिस्टम है. वेस्टर्न सिस्टम वे फिलॉसफी. हमारे यहाँ दर्शन जो हैं उनकी क्लासिफिकेशन बड़ी अलग है. You see, now for example, I have already told you we have three schools. तीन संप्रदाय हैं.
जी.
There is the Sanatan, there is the Bauddha and the Jain. In fact, if you make a binary, it is Sanatan versus Bauddha and Jain, because Bauddha and Jain are both non-theocentric. There is no God. There is no God in Buddhism and in Jainism. I have often wondered, of course, there are subtle differences in their entire epistemology and their, for example, some of the most famous things, the Shunyavad of Buddhism and Syadvad of the Jainas and Apohavad of the Jainas. You see, the Buddhists, their doctrines, very important doctrines, they enunciated apart from the Sanatan systems. So Shaddarshan belongs to the Sanatan system. Shaddarshan belongs to the Sanatan system, and these two are different systems. And then in the Sanatan system itself, you see, we have the six, of course. ये तो हम जानते ही हैं. In fact, counting begins with Nyaya and Nyaya Vaisheshika. When people start counting the Indian systems, they begin with Nyaya Vaisheshika, because both of these are concerned with Jagat, with the world, with hard पदार्थवादी. ये पदार्थ के दर्शन हैं जो एग्जिस्ट करते हैं पदार्थ के. And then second is the system Sankhya and Yoga, which are concerned with the mind, and how the mind understands Jagat, Sankhya Yoga. And finally, they come to what lies beyond this Jagat and Jeev, what lies beyond the Dharma and Brahma. Dharma and Brahman. The Niyamaka, the regulatory principles of this Jagat and Jiva. Regulatory principles of Jagat and Jiva. Thank you very much.
Thank
This
you
is very
very
nice.
much. Thank
Namaskar.
you very much, Professor Saab.
Namaskar.
It's been
Namaskar.
wonderful. Namaste.